I'm sorry if I sound weird. I'm kind of sick right now. But anyway, hello, welcome back to another week of me trying to learn digital art as fueled by my excessive love for anime and manga and the desire to draw all the fan art that I've always wanted to draw. Presented by my mascot, Lem, because I still don't have the skills and patience to draw my own avatar. This week ended up being very different from the previous two. Previously, I was drawing something new every single day, either straight up copying the reference or changing the reference for practice purposes or drawing from imagination. This week, however, as I had mentioned in the last video, I was going to focus on no more than 2 characters. I was going to study them and then attempt to seriously draw them a few days later. And I ended up dedicating the entire week just to one character. Funnily enough, even though it was just one, I still spent over 11 hours on drawing them throughout the entire week. And that character being... She is my favorite alive character from the entire series, has been since the very first time I saw her. I drew this before the second season started, but I'm recording this audio after episode 2 has already aired, and she's still the best girl in the entire show. I am so hyped for this arc to be finally animated. But moving on to the actual practice. First, I got some official art of Kana and the DDs. The 2 heads are simply traced because I wanted to get the actual proportions down as future reference. I made some notes about her face here because I thought it would be easier if I had it later on rather than just eyeballing everything. Like, these 2 distances are, I think, the same, or the middle of the face without the hair is here, the bangs and between her eyes and the eyebrows. I could have done more, but I also knew I would get bored of sticking to too many notes. I didn't really touch the side profile much, I only really did check what type of nose she has, since they differ slightly depending on the art style. At this point I wasn't sure what I'll be drawing of her later on, but I thought it would be helpful just to have them. It was really interesting to see just how much higher the hair is as compared to where the scalp actually ends, which, thinking back, is something I should have paid more attention to in weeks 1 and 2, because I always ended up changing where the hair ends. Then, still on the same day, I decided to also pick the colors for the skin and hair. I didn't care too much about whether the face looks proper or not, proportion-wise. I just needed a base to test out the colors. I obviously did have the official art right next to it, but I was still picking them by eye as personal practice. I gotta say, there is so much going on in her eyes. I really shouldn't be surprised by it anymore because when season 1 was airing, I was constantly talking to my friends about how pretty and detailed it was, but I guess studying it really does give a new perspective. I wasn't expecting to see blue in there from the top. I always thought it's just variations of red and pink and maybe purple, but I guess not. By the end of it, these are the colors and some random notes that I decided on. Eye colors are on the top, then here are the skin colors, and here are the ones for the hair. I'm sorry if my notes don't make any sense to you, they do to me, I swear. Moving on. I know I said it at least twice by now, that I would only draw the chosen characters from shoulders or waist up, but since I'm spending so much time on studying just her, I broke that rule. I love setting rules for myself, only to break them the next day. This exercise wasn't so much about making the poses accurate and pretty, but about getting used to keeping the proportions in mind while drawing, and in general, just getting used to drawing Kana in hopes of getting my mind to develop some repetition skills, or whatever it's called. All of these are pretty generic anime girl poses, because being creative takes too much time and energy, and I was saving it for the final piece. I also planned to do one more, but by the end, I wasn't really feeling in the mood for it anymore. The fact that I have no idea how clothes work and what to do with them for these poses wasn't helping either. So I left it here, and the next day I decided I would do the same thing I did in the beginning. I would pick the colors for the final outfit, and because I hate myself, I picked her idol clothes. Last week I was complaining about Lena's uniform being too complicated, so obviously it makes sense to pick something even worse now, right? That's what we all do, right? Unlike with Lena, however, I dedicated a whole session just to Kana's clothes. I tried to keep the proportions more or less there, but the purpose of this was literally just to 1. Draw it once to make sure I take note of all the elements, and 2. Pick the colors I would use in the final piece. I decided on the shadow colors as well, but since I'm not confident in shading clothes and this whole thing was just her outfit, I left it with only the base colors. It was the quickest practice session out of all the days, but it was something I would have needed to do anyway. This way, I saved the time and energy for the final challenge. After those 3 days of studying, I got my Kana cheat sheet that I would reference, hair colors that I would use, more or less the pose I wanted to go with, and I got some references for it, which is to say I suffered through taking a photo of myself sitting in a very weird and uncomfortable position. Another thing, because I wanted to push myself with this, I decided I would try to do something for the background as well. And by something, I mean anything other than leaving it plain white. You'll see that it will end up of visibly lower quality, but it would have taken me more than just 1 day to learn how to do backgrounds. So it is what it is. And finally, we have the big day, or rather, big 4 days, because this piece took me over 8 hours to finish. Day 1 was dedicated purely to sketching. The pose I chose was weird, but also very anime-esque, if you ask me. So sticking to the proportions was tricky, and I had to make her into a stickman for it to work. Then you have my amazing attempts at drawing boxes and covering them up with clothes to hide the fact that I have no idea what I'm doing. Drawing feet was more difficult than it has any right to be, and then with the hands I decided to just leave it for future Q to worry about. My frustration with the hands later on was second only to my frustration with the background, honestly. Overall, the sketching took me just over an hour to finish, and little did I know that doing line art would make me want to rip my hair out. There were 3 parts that took me the longest when it comes to line art, and the first of them was the part I started with, the hair. So Kana's hair is short, and in both my study sheet and some other references, there isn't too much variation to it. I think I got the direction more or less correct, but I feel like longer hair would have been easier for a beginner like me, since there are more possibilities to make it look interesting. I'm not saying short hair isn't interesting. All I'm saying is that I don't have the skills or the knowledge to make it so right now. The second part that took the longest were the frills on her shirt and skirt. The rest of the outfit, even the shoes, was surprisingly simple. But those frills, it's not even that they were particularly difficult, because they weren't. There were just so many of them in various places and various positions, and yeah, you know. And the last part that took the longest, the gift from past me, her hands, or gloves, or whatever. It was so frustrating doing it over and over again that I don't even want to talk about it anymore. I never ended up liking them. I just settled on something I thought looked decent enough. My biggest mistake may have been placing them so close to her face, which in turn means they are within the area where most people would look, though I couldn't fully half-ass them even if I was really tempted. But it was too late to change it by then. Line art alone took me 2.5 hours, more or less. I don't know if that's long or not, but at least I was pretty content with how it ended up, except for her hands, of course. And here comes the final boss, coloring. Oshinoko is one of those series that no matter if it's the manga or an illustration or an anime screenshot, it will look gorgeous. My skills, on the other hand, are far from it on a practical level. If there is anything I'm pretty confident in, it's my analytical skills, since I did graduate from a STEM course at uni. Obviously, pure analysis isn't enough to acquire the practical skills in any field, art included, but for this last stage, I did some basic research before starting on it. And by research, I mean staring at some of the illustrations made by my favorite artists out there. And not just staring, but trying to notice what they did to make the illustrations look more unique. There is only so much I could learn by looking at the finished pieces instead of watching the actual process of finishing them, but I would say that for my skill level at the time, I still got quite a bit out of it. Much more than I would have from only looking at anime screenshots, where there are usually only some basic shadows. It wasn't perfect, of course, but it was at the same time the best I could do, and it took me 2 whole days to color it, coming up to over 4 hours spent on that stage alone. After finishing it, I was thanking my past self for having picked all the colors beforehand. I literally would have cried otherwise. The hair and the eyes were the 2 things I was the least worried about, because I've done them before in one way or the other, regardless of the final outcome, and because coloring eyes is still my favorite thing to do. The skin, less so, and the clothes even less than that. Fabric folds and such are a whole new mystery, and they will be a whole new journey for me in the future. For someone who doesn't know how light works, even in the most basic scenario, I sure picked the most complicated option I could think of at the time. I actually did try to search up some references on it at some point, but let's just say I did my best and I'll revisit it in the future. I was actually testing out a few things with this piece, and one conclusion I ended up with was that I think I prefer filling in the whole shadow and then erasing the parts that are in the light, as opposed to just painting the shadows. I tried out both techniques for different elements, and I don't know, if the shadows aren't too big or too complicated, I guess just painting them is fine, but I still much prefer just erasing the parts that I think are illuminated. I think I'm just overthinking shadows too much when I'm focusing on them, but when I'm erasing, I literally just go, yeah, that's how it's gonna be, no need to mess with it anymore, and time to move on, or something like that. Other than that, I'm quite happy with the frills and the gem on her tie. When I was coloring it, I thought it was really funny how the colors I'm using are very obviously pink and purple, but they still look white in contrast to the surroundings. I mean, I guess that's how colors work, but I didn't know that at the time. An unsurprising conclusion, coloring line art still does wonders, and adding those few brighter lines to the hair, the loose strands if you will, also helps to make it seem less heavy. But I also need to be careful not to overdo it with them, and that is something to still work on. As for the background, well, it is what it is. For a first attempt, I will give it a pass. That is all I'm gonna say about it. And now, after adding some filters on the last day and adjustments, the final result is this. Look at her. Look at her! Recording this voiceover really takes me back to how I felt after just having finished the drawing, and I mean in the best way possible. I was so proud of it. This felt so good, even with all the things I could see that should have been done differently. It's like, that's a proper fan art that I drew. Give me back that power high I had in the beginning of the week too, and multiply it by 10. Yeah, it still doesn't count towards my goal of drawing something from imagination that I would honestly like, because I did use quite a few references for Kana, but do you see her? It was 8 hours of work, and it was tiring, but my god was it worth the joy I felt upon seeing it finished. Is it perfect? Hell no. Is it good? I don't know, but it's good to me. Now, I try to end each week with a comparison to when I started, but this was a bit different because it's fan art and not my own characters being redrawn. So let's compare it to some pieces where I was doing more or less the same thing. Here's a sketch of Anna from Shaman King that I drew on day 2, which took me roughly 20 minutes, I think. Here are the 2 drawings of Lena and Shin that I did on days 11 and 12, which took me 2 hours and 45 minutes and 1 hour and 45 minutes respectively. And here is my Arima Kana fan art from day 21, which took me over 8 hours across 4 days to finish. For once, I don't even need to feel sorry for myself, because that is some good character development there. In conclusion, taking the time to study something works. Shocking, I know. And that's it for week 3. At this point, I should probably have something more motivational to say, but I'm really not that good at it, so if anyone out there also trying to learn to draw or do anything else for them, keep it up, because it will feel amazing one day. It may take a while, but it will feel good in the end. Or at least that's how it was for me. How it is for me. Thank you to everyone who clicked on this video and stayed until the end, and I'll be back with week 4 after I'm back from holidays. As a goodbye, here is a full time-lapse of the Kana art because I find it so satisfying to watch it. See ya!